My fellow Americans, tonight I'd like to talk with you about immigration.
We need to build a wall.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country.
We're a nation of immigrants, and we must uphold that tradition, which has strengthened our country in so many ways.
We are a nation of immigrants, and I am proud of it.
We must be mad, literally mad as a nation, to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000 dependents who are, for the most part, the material of the future growth of the immigrant-descended population. It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pyre.
I'm Jim Goad, and this is A Nation of Idiots. I'm here on a sunny Georgia day down on the farm. I've got my pal Keith Elbert Lee from Stone Mountain, Georgia. How you doing today, Keith?
Hey, dynamite.
We're going to talk.
For asking.
All right, don't talk over me. We're going to cover. Hold on. Oh, this is what happens. Anyway, we're going to cover immigration today. Keith's going to share a little bit about his experience having his neighborhood flooded with Somalian and Northern African and I think some chimpanzee refugees. It's quite a mix that they've sprinkled over there in Stone Mountain, Keith. Mainly we're here, this is the purpose every week, is to read and discuss the week that perished. Keith insists that I say perished, but that's an incorrect pronunciation. That's the pronunciation from the losing side, so they don't get to decide. This is the week's most cynical, inimical, and atypical headlines. You know, after I've done 4 years of this, you got to rhyme 3 things every fucking week. It gets tough, Keith.
I know it does. You're the man for the job, though.
Thank you, Keith. Speaking of Keith, Keith Olbermann continues losing his marbles. A long, long time ago in a country much unlike the USA in 2017, Keith Olbermann was a sportscaster. Then at some point, that's the first of my many mouth noises today. Then at some point, televised sports became a bully pulpit for cultural Marxism. These days, Olbermann hosts an online show for GQ called The Resistance, which avoids sports and mostly consists of Olbermann smearing Donald Trump, everyone around him, everyone who supports him, and everyone who even dared to think a halfway positive thought about him as filthy Nazi scumbag fucks. Olbermann recently penned a collection of impotent vituperations called Trump is fucking crazy. This is not a joke. And here's a pet peeve. Fucking, it's got an asterisk where the U is. We're not supposed to know that's fucking? Is a child going to see that? Oh, mommy, that doesn't say fucking. It says F asterisk king. What's the point? Either say it, it's like saying HE double hockey sticks, or I don't give a darn, or that's a bunch of BS. Trump, like he goes, takes it right to the ledge and then doesn't jump off. Trump is F asterisking crazy. This is not a joke. With a cover depicting a whimpering and emotionally beaten Olbermann curled up on the floor, draped in an American flag, and looking absolutely fucking insane. Have you seen this picture?
Yes.
I'm trying to.
He does.
When I do the mouth noises, I'm trying to pull away. Yeah, he just looks like a mentally ill person, like a homeless person.
Yeah.
With every appearance he makes these days, Olbermann's wounded face conveys the deep-rooted sense of moral superiority that makes it impossible for him to be happy in a world teeming with such toxic injustice. Just taking a moment to bask and bathe in the misery and agony and moral agony that Keith Olbermann finds himself imprisoned in constantly. Olbermann keeps ratcheting up the deeply wounded righteous hysteria to the point where at any given moment his ovaries might explode. After Trump banned trannies in the military and pardoned Joe Arpaio, Olbermann tweeted, "Now you've banned loyal..." I'm trying to do a Keith Olbermann, trying to even think of his voice here. I'll just do a wounded white male. I'm not really sure I could capture his voice. "Now you've banned loyal soldiers, pardoned that piece of shit Arpaio, and still not declared an emergency. You are filth, real Donald Trump." When Arpaio publicly thanked Trump, Olbermann's measured response was, "You and the POTUS can go fuck yourselves, you racist Nazi fucks." When Sebastian Gorka resigned from the Trump administration, Pius Keith responded thusly. Gorka resigns, so the day isn't a total loss. Now leave the country, said Gorka, you Nazi fuck! And when Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos expressed concerns for schools affected by the Texas floods, he told her, the hurricane is going to do less damage to schools than you are, motherfucker. Although he works for Gentleman's Quarterly, his behavior is rather ungentlemanly. Wouldn't you say, Keith? You're from the South, where honor and gentlemanliness is all about.
Exactly. Thank you. Manners. We're all very well mannered down here. He just seems unhinged, and I don't know why I laugh at him, because he seems like he is utterly void of a sense of humor. This guy seems like the most humorless guy I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's just in the grips of, like, it's like they took him to some gulag off the American coast and just broke his will down particle by particle, and now he's programmed. All right, okay, but Olbermann is not, but let's try again. But Olbermann is only one star in a massive galaxy of flailing leftists gripped by a collective case of Tourette's. What you hear are not the sounds of resistance. It is the world's first live-streamed death rattle. Next item. Bail denied Charlottesville activist due to, quote, hate speech. Christopher Cantwell was scheduled to be one of the featured speakers at the ill-fated Unite the Right rally that ended in bloodshed at Charlottesville, Virginia on August 12th. He became widely mocked as the crying Nazi after live-streaming himself on the verge of tears in the canceled event's aftermath. Have you seen the crying Nazi video?
I have. It's a sad sight.
It's really a sad day for proud Nazis across the nation when one of their finest has to fucking cry on camera. First, I thought...
Especially because he comes across as so cocksure, like on that Vice documentary, like he is just down for the fight. Ready.
I've heard it suggested that he's on steroids, so he's got mood swings. But and initially I was like, well, come on, like if you're going to record this and you cry, like do a second take. But apparently it was on Facebook, so make of that what you will. Although no charges have been filed against the black man who used a homemade flamethrower against rally attendees, Cantwell has been booked and charged with 2 counts of illegal use of tear gas and 1 count of malicious bodily injury, all felonies. Each charge carries a possible sentence of 5 years. Now comes word that a judge has denied bail for Cantwell based on the unprovable and unfalsifiable premise that Cantwell's hate speech makes him a risk to the community should he be released. It should be obvious to anyone with even a thin pubic hair's worth of discretion that should Cantwell be released, he'd be in far more danger than anyone around him. And it's a troubling portent that alleged thought crimes now seem to be the sole determinant of who goes to jail and who continues walking among us. I remember one thing when I was going through my whole experience with the legal system. I found out that in Germany, if there's evidence of a crime, they have to prosecute you. That's the law. I don't know if that's true or not, but that sounds like a better system than here, where they can pick and choose and go after who they don't like, especially for their viewpoints. Hate speech. I'm not even sure what he said. Who cares? Like, what does that have to do with attacking someone with a gas? Was it hate gas that he foisted on them? Right. I don't understand the criminalizing of what's in someone's brain, because that you can't really get more into Winston Smith and was his name O'Brien, his interrogator. That's just prying into someone's mind to scrub it clean before you blow their brains out.
But I think that's how the system neutralizes guys like that. Instead of being some grand battle fought out in public like he was kind of saying or suggesting, they just put you away somewhere where you're going to be completely ineffective.
Yeah, I'm not sure how effective he was crying about being persecuted. This is it's a really strange video. Kansas City serial killer preying on white men. There's a pervasive myth, and in the week that perished, which is on tackymag.com, in case I didn't mention it, TAKIMAG.com. Every time I've got the word myth here, I've got a link that proves that it's a myth. There's a pervasive myth that all serial killers are white, similar to the myth that only poor southern hillbillies are inbred, and the myth that whites commit incest and molest children at higher rates than other groups. Since all these myths are statistically inaccurate, one feels tempted to conclude that the myth peddlers simply aren't very fond of white people. Last week, Kansas City police arrested 22-year-old Frederick Damon Scott, who is black, in case the Damon didn't tip you off, and charged him with the murder of 2 white men, aged 54 and 57. He is also a suspect in 3 other shootings that began in South Kansas City this May. All victims were older white men, and all were shot from behind. 4 of them were walking along the same dog trail when they were murdered. Court records say that in 2014, Scott threatened to shoot up a school and, quote, kill all white people. Beyond Kansas City, the story has remained as untouched as fresh virgin snow by the mainstream media. They're too busy trying to depict the vehicular slaying of a white woman by a white man in Charlottesville as a racially motivated hate crime. And this would be funny if it wasn't so sick and didn't portend things that seem to be getting increasingly dangerous. Just as with Trayvon, where it immediately became a white man who was attacking him because he's black due to a deceptively edited NBC splicing of the 911 call. What we have here is, in Charlottesville, was a hate crime when a white guy rams his car into another car, and that car hits a white woman who's blocking the streets. But I see already, not only has this not extended beyond Kansas City, in Kansas City, the newspapers apparently are portraying this guy as a victim, and he's mentally ill. And of course, it can't possibly have anything to do with hate or be racially motivated. He's only acting out against a racist society which drove him mad. Keith, this is where you're supposed to say something.
It reminds me of Brian Nichols, actually. I don't know if people know who that is, but he was a guy in Atlanta that was facing, he was going to be incarcerated for rape. He already was. He was facing some trial regarding that. And then he went on a rampage and killed a white judge, mentally beat an officer to where she was brain damaged. And then went on a killing spree, killed like 3 or 4 other white people, basically told a woman he took captive, about, we've got it really hard, and that kind of fed into his motivation. And, and of course it was big news in Atlanta, but I mean, the racial angle was there. I mean, no one played it up or denied it, but it was definitely
maybe
there.
He was racially battered. It was a lifetime of experiencing racial macro and micro aggressions, and he decided to snap. I'm surprised they haven't even. Maybe I just gave them a new legal defense. No, I'm a racially battered man.
Yeah, that's kind of what he was saying to the woman he took hostage. He was like, well, we've had it really hard in America, and kind of was like, well, you can kind of see what where I'm going here.
This is every time that's said, and yeah, relative to white people, maybe it is tougher to be a black person in a lot of ways. Well, in some ways though, you have blanket immunity in cases like this. You can go kill white people, say, I'm live on ABC and NBC. Hello, everyone. See this gun? I'm shooting white people because I hate them.
Right.
And they will still say it's not a hate crime. So that's a privilege, but economically they're not doing as well. However, how are they doing compared to, say, the Ivory Coast or Sierra Leone or any of these other places from whence they were plucked 300-400 years ago? Can you really compare? I mean, are they living longer there? Are they making more money there? Are they freer from disease and danger and crime there?
Right.
No. But when you bring that up, what's the response? You're only saying that because you hate black people. That's like, no, I'm saying that because it's the fucking truth. And every time you guys try to club me over the head with some imaginary guilt hammer, I'm going to point this out. And I guess it's embarrassing to point out to certain advocates of black people, and maybe it's embarrassing to black people en masse. I'd be embarrassed. If Ireland was... people were walking around with animal pelts and sticking their fists up cows' vaginas in Ireland, I wouldn't take that as a matter of pride. It'd be only natural to feel a little ashamed. And maybe a little bit of rage at whoever brought it up. Still a fact, though. And that's the idea of hate facts. I wrote back in the Redneck Manifesto in 1996. These are all facts. Can facts be racist? What do you think, Keith? Can facts be racist?
Well, clearly the answer is yes, obviously. Where have you been? It's 2017. Jeez.
It is the current year. I keep forgetting that. Like, after all we've been through as a nation, I can't even believe we're still having this discussion. Next item.
Even.
Yeah, I'm SMH right now. BBC unveils site in Pidgin English. This is going to become my homepage. In order to increase its market reach across the lush and prosperous plains and jungles of western central Africa, the British Broadcasting Company has launched a website in Pidgin English. Pidgin English is said to be spoken by 75 million people in Nigeria alone. According to the unpronounceable Bilkisu Labaran, editorial director of the new site, Pidgin English is, quote, an informal lingua franca. It is a language that really unites people and cuts across all sorts of barriers, ethnic, regional, and socioeconomic. The new site's headlines feature pidgin droppings such as, Indian woman divorce husband because dem get no toilet. Why dem they call hurricane human being name? How Tanzania they kill mosquito? And our personal favorite, why China they chop African donkey? Dem gon be real smart now. Item. The magic and mystery, and this is a question, this is kind of a technical question, maybe it should be behind the scenes, Keith, but every time I go item, should sort of like a sound pop up, like a wacky...
Ooh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
all right.
Yes.
We're going to have a BS session and a big powwow and chew the fat about that. The magic and mystery of Africa. As all men of virtue know, Africa invented everything and only plunged into seemingly prehistoric conditions after it was all stolen from them while they were sleeping one fateful night. This vast continent is the cradle not only of all technological progress, it hosts a gorgeous mosaic of rich cultural traditions that include killer phone calls, penis panics, ritual dismemberment of child witches, and car thieves who magically transform into goats. And see, when somebody says, oh, Africa, oh, crappy, bad, bummer, I say, yeah, name another continent where car thieves transform into goats. It truly is a magical place. Now comes news from the thriving nation of Mozambique that bald men are being targeted for murder because a local superstition claims, quote, that the head of a bald man contains gold. Ah, if it were only true. From South America, where the murder rate shot up astronomically after apartheid ended, funny how that works, comes a charming story involving a cannibal potluck dinner, where police found a boiling pot containing 8 human ears. An estimated third of the residents in the tiny village of Esegadlueni admit to have partaken in eating human flesh, which they claim makes them bulletproof. South Africa, I'm trying my best with these mouth clearing. South Africa is also where children are raped as a cure for AIDS. The world rejoices at the fact that with the evil colonizers having been routed, Africans can finally live up to their full potential. See, Keith's quiet because he knows it's going to get him in trouble if he says anything with the neighborhood. Next item, Jews in the news. You don't have any Jews in your neighborhood, do you, Keith? Or are they hiding?
Not really. I mean, the demographics here, whites make up like 17 or 15% or something in my neighborhood.
And why do you prevent Jews from living in your neighborhood?
I don't. You know what?
Denial. Okay, next item. Jews in the news. Japanese Deputy Prime Minister Tara Aso. It kind of sounds like asshole. Tara, a big fat asshole.
Colossal asshole.
The colossal asshole. Japanese Deputy Prime Minister Tara Aso has been forced to grovel, beg, and apologize for suggesting that Adolf Hitler may have had the, quote, right motives, proving that the power of the Simon Wiesenthal Center to shame people into submission extends halfway around the world. Rabbi Abraham Cooper called Aso's comment downright dangerous. Were his comments as dangerous as living in the Gaza Strip? Now, originally what I had here, and then I decided that Rabbi Abraham Cooper might sue, I said he called Aso's comment downright dangerous before masturbating to torture porn of Palestinians. But I decided, that would be counterfactual, wouldn't be the truth. So I decided, I'm gonna wrap that up and cocoon it in a giant disclaimer that's not true. To my knowledge, Rabbi Abraham Cooper does not masturbate to torture porn of Palestinians. So let's just clear the air with that. All right? A husband and wife team of food vendors at the Minnesota State Fair have likewise been forced into a terrified public apology for selling a smoked salmon sandwich. That's a hard one. Smoked salmon sandwich called the Swindler, which is highly offensive because it resurrects an ancient and entirely discredited trope claiming that Jews have ever swindled anyone in the history of the world. How the hell, is this a Semitic sandwich? Just because it's smoked salmon, it's a Jew? It's a Jewish sandwich?
It's like the Shylock sandwich or
Talk
something.
about tasting Jews in your sandwiches, which if you want to look it up online, The Men Who Taste Jews in Their Sandwiches, it's an article I wrote a long time ago. So They were forced to apologize and saying, no, we were off base. Jews have never swindled anyone. This was an anti-Semitic sandwich. I wonder if they destroyed all the sandwiches or, sent them off to the buckets. For all the talk one hears of white privilege, it is increasingly evident that there is no greater privilege than blanket immunity from criticism. I've said this many times. A lot of the main problem with this idiotic leftist identity politics bullshit is that when you claim any group has a blanket assumption of innocence and oppression and immunity, there will be nut jobs and psychopaths in that group who take advantage of that and commit the most dastardly deeds. Like we mentioned earlier with blacks, well, blacks can't commit hate crimes, even when they're blowing guys' heads off on camera and saying, I'm doing this because I hate white people. Also with the Orlando massacre, I can't believe that was immediately turned into a homophobic hate crime. This guy went to a gay nightclub, the Pulse nightclub, was it, in Orlando, killed 50 people. And to my knowledge, wasn't there, but he called 911 and said he was doing it on behalf of ISIS or Al-Qaeda, or one of these Islamist rambunctious, aggressively pro-Islamic groups. But nobody could bring themselves to say, just as with women, like there's just this blanket assumption they can't possibly, and if they got their boyfriend and blinded him by stabbing out his eyeballs with an ice pick, the immediate response is, well, what did he do? Don't you think that's divisive and encourages division, Keith, to just say, you're the innocent ones, you're the guilty ones, have at it?
I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about that sandwich. I'm hungry. Of course, yeah, obviously, but I mean, it's what is it? What do you? It's like the Scarlet Letter or whatever.
Roll it back here. You heard about an anti-Semitic sandwich and you wanted to eat it anyway.
Yes.
All right.
Now I love locks.
All right, the ADL's getting a phone call the minute we hang up. Last item here: injecting xenophobes with cuddle hormones. This shit just gets crazier. For years, the scientific community has made bold strides in seeking medical remedies for the sin of bigotry. And that links to an old, about 6-year-old article I did called Give the Bigots a Pill. They they took this heart medication that's supposed to, I guess, calm you, and then ran the Harvard Implicit Association test, which is absolutely fraudulent bullshit test, but they use it. What it does, you sit in front of a computer screen, and they start flashing black and white faces and good and bad words. And then they start doing it so rapidly that you just have to, without even thinking, like it's supposed to measure your subconscious reaction to seeing a black face and a positive word or negative word. And I took the test 5 times. Not trying to, cheat on the test. I just, they come so fast, you really can't even think. 5 completely different results. None of them were even close. You have a strong favor for black people. You have a strong, preference for white people. You have no preference. They were all over the place. But anyway, they were encouraging giving bigots this pill which lowers your resistance so they don't hate people who don't look like them so much. It's quite a circuitous route I took from that one line, though. Now a group of researchers in Germany and Oklahoma. What a weird pairing that is. Like... Who initiated this tete-a-tete? Germany and Oklahoma have released a paper that claims xenophobia can be reduced by injecting the evil xenophobes with oxytocin, also known as the cuddle hormone. Test subjects were exclusively Caucasian, because everyone knows, and actually in that previous heart study, every one of the test subjects was Caucasian, because everyone knows they're the only racial group capable of bigotry. But after, quote, oxytocin-enforced norm compliance. Oxytocin-enforced norm compliance. Talk about a clockwork rainbow. Fuck. But after oxytocin-enforced norm compliance, the xenophobes showed higher rates of altruism toward refugees and even increased their monetary donations toward pro-refugee charities by a formidable 74%. If you can't shame them into submission, it's evident that the only way to break their will is to shoot them up with chemicals designed to make them feel cuddly toward those who've been selected to replace them.
Yikes.
That's this week's Week That Perished. You can read it on tackymag.com, TAKIMAG.com. Keith.
Yes, sir.
Today's subject is immigration.
Right.
We're going to have Peter Brimelow and his fabulous hair on later.
Nice.
Guy's 69. He still looks like a touring member of Herman's Hermits.
He does.
Yeah,
Actually.
he's got this like 1965 British invasion haircut. I guess, have you traced your family roots back? You say you're related to Robert E. Lee.
Yeah. I traced my family's roots back on my father's side all the way to the Revolutionary War.
What about before that?
Don't know about before that. Haven't done that yet. Probably will someday soon.
So basically, your soul is stained with a lot of America's sins more than maybe the majority of Americans at this point.
Yes, absolutely. I'm reminded of that often.
Do you think your ancestors were immigrants or settlers?
Well, it's interesting to note that Robert E. Lee's father came over as an indentured servant.
White slave. But that's a myth. The New York Times told us it's a myth, and I actually didn't completely destroy that New York Times article along with Michael A. Hoffman II in an article called White Slavery Denial, which you can also read on tackymag.com. I'm going to plug this shit out of them today because I was told to. Tackymag, Takimag, Tacky Theodorakopoulos and his daughter Mandalina Theodorakopoulos. All right, so how long ago did they start? You have a nice house in Stone Mountain. How long ago did they start sending refugees in?
I'd say, according to my knowledge, there was a UN resettlement program that started in 1995, and that's when they started. But I don't think they really affected the demographics in a way that would be noticeable to outsiders or people just passing through until maybe like 10 years ago.
Okay. What's the complete female Muslim outfit? Is that the burqa or the hijab? I'm not sure.
The hijab is just like the head and shoulders covering, and the burqa, the full burqa, which I see often in our area actually.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the only place I might have seen in America where you can just see chicks in full burqas pumping gas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And how's the neighborhood changed? You've got the goat slaughterer down the street.
Right. There's creeping Sharia. I think the perception that a lot of people have about Sharia is like, well, it's unconstitutional, so you can't have Sharia law. But that's not really how it's done. It's done through groups of people that choose to associate together and do it. And they're Islamic groups. And so what you have here is you have the guy slaughtering goats down the street that is actually going to court and facing a jury trial in the next couple of weeks, rather than just do what everybody else in the community is doing and live in a regular, this place is zoned for single family homes, and he wants to run a farm and a madrasa and slaughter animals. And, it's like if I would have bought a house next to a slaughterhouse. That's what I want.
This naturally leads to the next question, which is, why do you hate so much?
I'm so filled with rage and hate, I can't even articulate an answer for that.
Okay, according to the clock here, Keith, we've already gone 27 minutes. That's maybe 17 minutes too much for me before I need to pee. So I'm going to go pee. You have a splendid week, and I recommend that you get 200 cc's of oxytocin shot into you so you're not as hateful. God bless you, Keith.
I will try. God bless you.
Bye.
See you soon.
Okay, Jim Goad from down on the farm in Georgia. I've got Peter Brimelow of VDare up in Connecticut, is it? Peter, are you there?
Yes, it is. We're just a few miles south of the Massachusetts line. We're up in the Connecticut Berkshires.
Connecticut Berkshires. Now let's GPS this accent. What part of England is that from?
Oh, well, I'm from the north of England. I was born in Lancashire and lived in Yorkshire, and we latterly lived near Liverpool. But I've been here since 1970, Jim. It just hasn't rubbed off.
Well, we are a nation of immigrants, so let's hear your inspirational immigration story. What brought you here?
Oh, my brother and I'm an identical twin. We decided that all was lost in Britain in the late 60s. And despite the bear market rally of Mrs. Thatcher, I still think that's the case. I think that country will ultimately break up.
What made you think all was lost? What was
it was just interesting because of course it seems halcyon, and considering it was relatively homogenous and relatively socially ordered society at that point. But you could see the trends. And more particularly, you could see the profound corruption of the ruling class, not specifically financial corruption, but moral corruption. Britain as a nation ceased to exist in these people's hearts, and which is why they were so keen on joining the European Union. You know, they just wanted to merge. They wanted to sell off a bankrupt company.
I've seen so many times the sentiment that if British soldiers who fought in World War II had known what would become of Britain, they never would have.
Well, that was certainly my father's point of view. He was 6.5 years in the British Army, and at the time he died, he said he repeatedly said it simply hadn't been worth it. Curiously enough, you know, there was a book, an oral history that came out about 5 years ago of interviews with World War II veterans in Britain, and that was the universal sentiment. They all said it wasn't worth it. And the reason they gave was immigration. They said the country had been completely transformed. It wasn't the country they fought for, and they knew that the ruling class simply didn't care what they thought.
How easy was it to get to the USA? Did you have to pass literacy
It was
tests?
very tricky. It's
Tricky.
extremely tricky for us. Yeah, very difficult. I mean, basically, the 1965 Immigration Act in this country, you know, it cut off. It kicked off this tremendous surge of legal immigration that we've seen in the last few years, after a long pause of 40, 50 years. But it also, and most people don't realize this, it reoriented the immigration inflow away from the first world countries and towards third world countries. And so in Britain, the impact on Britain was very dramatic. It cut the flow of immigrants from Britain from about 40 or 50,000 a year down to around 10,000 a year. Now, in our case, my brother and I both went to the business school at Stanford in California, and we were able. It's a long story. My brother got back into the U.S. because he worked for an American bank, which petitioned him in as a valuable employee. And in my case, I went up to Canada, and I worked there for about 10 years, and eventually I came back to join the Senate staff, the U.S. Senate staff, and the U.S. Senator, amazingly enough, Orrin Hatch, who I'm sure regrets it, told the INS that I was a uniquely valuable person, and that's how I got in.
How was Canada living in Canada different than the U.S.?
I love Canada, and I wrote a book about Canadian politics, made a number of predictions which annoyed the establishment there a great deal. But the truth is that it's not different. I mean, one of the arguments I used to make, my conclusion in my book, was that Canada is fundamentally a section of the American nation. That was very unpopular. That's to say, English Canada is. Right. Quebec, of course, is a separate nation completely. That was very unpopular because at that stage, quote unquote, Canadian nationalism was very popular, and they had all kinds of elaborate arguments as to why they were not really Americans and they were distinct and all this stuff, but they're not.
Of all the things I've ever written, I never got as much hate mail and hate reaction to something called "Let's Invade Canada." It's a very weird psychological relationship Canadians have with Americans.
Very strange, and a lot of it's based on envy.
Well, yeah, I was going to say in the ghetto they'd call it player hating, but yeah.
Well, the other thing about Canada is people don't realize, and people don't realize about the U.S., it's how a profoundly sectionalized society it is. So, for example, Western Canada, the people there normally think completely differently and view themselves completely differently from the people in Central Canada, that is to say, Ontario. And their political system is skewed toward, they don't have an electoral college or anything like that, so it's possible for the population centers of Central Canada to dominate the rest of the country and run it in its own interest, which is what actually happens.
Well, even when researching my book, Redneck Manifesto, I found on ancient internet bulletin board services them calling people in Alberta and Saskatchewan rednecks.
Exactly.
It's sort of, it's that same urban-rural split we have here. Here's, and this is similar to what Jared Taylor's Wikipedia profile is like. They get right in there in the first, well, with you it's the second sentence. Peter Brimelow, born 13 October 1947, is a British-born American writer. Okay, factual so far. He's the founder of the webzine VDare, which has been described as a white supremacist website. And
saying white supremacist at the moment, it goes back into...
That's they insert it when you're sleeping. Okay.
Right.
And group.
I never make any effort to correct my Wikipedia entry. Do you? It's just, there's all
I tried getting some voicemails in there that were used in court. I don't understand why they denied it. Their excuse for denying it was that it came from me, but just this girl threatening to chop my head off and blow my brains out and everything, but they didn't let that on there. It says it described as a white supremacist website and group by various publications. A charge denied by Brimelow. So you're a denier, too, on top of that. I'm just fascinated with the linguistics here. And the entry for VDARE. VDARE is an American website focused on opposition to immigration to the United States. Okay. And is associated with white supremacy, white nationalism, and the alt-right.
It sounds like they've sharpened this up since I last looked. It does go back in two. But Wikipedia is obviously controlled by SJWs.
It's insane. I mean, and we did this with Ramsey Paul last week. The two prongs of white supremacy are you have to think they're genetically superior to everyone else, and you also wish for them to dominate everyone else. Would you fall under either one of those prongs of that definition?
No. In terms, I mean, obviously, any intelligent person realizes that there are differences between the races. On average, and anybody who's looked into it can see that whites are superior in terms of IQ and various things to blacks and to large parts of the rest of the world, but not to North Asians, what we used to call Orientals. So even looking at it strictly in terms of supremacy, the evidence seems to be that that the average IQ of Japanese is higher than whites. So we're not supreme in that area. And in terms of dominating everybody else, of course, we would just, I think the general view of most people most white people in America is they just want to be left alone.
Right, or separate at the best.
Yeah,
so I'm wondering, have you talked to any legal experts? Should people start suing when they're accused of this? Because this is about as bad as in the current climate. There's besides child molester, there's really hard. It might be worse than child molester at this point.
Oh, it's worse than child. They're on the point of legalizing it.
And God forgive the white supremacist child molesters. I guess that they're the worst. But my God, I think that might be a tactic because this is inviting harm on people at this point.
Let me ask you, when is this podcast actually going to air?
Actually, we're airing live on Monday afternoon, even though in reality it's Sunday afternoon.
Okay. Well, in fact, we are taking legal action against some of the people, some of the things that were said to us about us when our Colorado conference was canceled just a couple of weeks ago. We were routinely described as white supremacists and so on. And this infuriated Tom Tancredo, the former congressman, who is on our board. Right. And so we are taking legal action they've got to at least say that we denied the charge or something. I mean, because there's no evidence for it actually, and in terms of its definition, as you pointed out.
I mean, if I had my druthers or was a dictator, I'd get rid of 95% of civil law because it's infantile. But if they're going to do that and destroy lives, I think maybe that's the way to go. Just sue them. If it's inaccurate, sue them for defamation. And I think take the SPLC route. Just sue the hell out of everyone. Sue everyone.
I don't have a great deal of faith in the American judicial system, particularly in this area, because I think that there's so many SJWs on the bench now. And they simply can't be relied upon to do justice. But on the other hand, as you know, for a media company to be faced with a lawyer's letter is a very disturbing thing, and it causes chaos internally. And so we're going to cause a lot of chaos in Colorado.
Yeah, bring them to the news. So what exactly happened in Colorado?
Oh, well, we had a conference booked for April 2018 in a resort called the Cheyenne Mountain Resort. Very nice place and very nice people. And after Charlottesville, there was one of these social justice warriors ramp-ups, of petitions and so on and so forth, and troll wars from their army of trolls. And the mayor of Colorado Springs, who is a Republican nominally, said that the city would not be providing support to this conference, which apparently meant that they weren't going to provide police protection for it. And after Charlottesville, of course, where the governor and the mayor conspired not to provide police protections at the conference, which was overrun by Antifa, that was a very serious threat. So at this point, the hotel got cold feet and cancelled the contract. We were prepared for this, and there was a penalty clause, and they had to pay a fairly large sum of money, $47,000 actually, to us for cancelling this conference. So they were obviously very desperate. They were obviously very, very frightened by what they were hearing.
I'm not that intimately familiar with the law. I've been beaten with the law, but how is it legal to tell the cops to let people get beaten?
Well, that's an extremely interesting question, Jim, and is the other part of the the litigation that we're preparing in Colorado. We've been told that there's a private cause of action for a civil rights suit against this mayor because he's violated that civil rights. So we're going to start. We're going to look into that and proceed with it this next week. I hate litigation.
Yeah.
And I hate paying lawyers money. But in this case, we've been driven to it. I will say also, though, Jim,
yes,
we've had maybe 15 bids from other hotels who want to have this conference. And this is because the hotel business is run by ordinary Americans who think that they live in a free country. And it doesn't occur to them that things are going to get this bad.
The idea, lawyers, for everything you hear about money in politics, I saw a stat a year or two ago. I think it's about 90 to 95% of political contributions from lawyers go to the Democrats. Coincidence? Not sure.
Right. And that's particularly true for trial lawyers, of course. I wrote a lot about this when I was at Forbes. It actually goes back to the corruption of the judicial system, because judges, by rewriting the laws, triggered the tort crisis. In other words, it became possible to sue companies for things, for accidents and things, which they previously would never have been allowed. But judges started to entertain these suits. And people who fell off skis, water skis, what are those things called that buzz around on lakes?
Jet skis?
Jet skis, yeah. Would then sue the manufacturer because they shouldn't have sold them this thing that caused them to harm themselves. And of course, 60 years ago, that would have been laughed out of court. But somewhere around about 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, the judges started to entertain these suits. And this made the people who make a living off this, the trial lawyers, make a great deal of money off it, and that's why they want the liberal judges on the court.
Completely changing the subject. 69 years old, yes, sir?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
How the hell is your hair so good still? It's like a lion's mane. I mean, like Jared Taylor, it's the white, it's the way he aspirates the WH. You're the hair guy. And I was saying earlier, you're still like a touring member of Herman's Hermits or something. You got that British invasion.
I've lasted the swine out. When we were little boys, we used to have a haircut very short, and I did grow it longer in the 60s, and I just simply kept it long.
Nice.
My brother used to say to me when he was on Wall Street, people in the 80s, that people think that long hair is old-fashioned, and there's a lot of ageism on Wall Street, and he kept his hair very short. But now I seem to have lasted them out, so that you see more people with longer hair now.
I shave my head.
Also, I don't like going to the barber, So
okay. Condition? Do you use a regular conditioner or? Anyway, I shave my head for many reasons, none of which are political, although I'm fine with people thinking it's political. One of the reasons is I had brain surgery, and my skull's been carved into twice, so I have this giant scar, and if I grew hair, it would sort of look like there's a vagina on the side of my head, so I don't do it. But it was thinning, and it was just horrible. But yes, enviable hair, complete distraction.
It's just one area where I've been lucky in life. As I have with my wife and young children.
Here's a Publisher's Weekly review of your 1995 book, Alien Nation: Common Sense About America's Immigration Disaster. Forbes senior editor Brimelo's alarmist slashing, that sounds violent kind of, alarmist slashing anti-immigration manifesto is likely to stir debate. He maintains that the 1965 Immigration Act and its recent amplifications choked off immigration from Northern and Western Europe while selectively reopening U.S. borders to a huge influx of minorities from third world countries. Many of these latter entrants are unskilled and require welfare support, and those who do work may adversely affect opportunities for poorer Americans, especially blacks, according to Brimelo. Because of multicultural programs, he charges, the new immigrants are not expected to assimilate, and thus they retain their separateness. Illegal immigration, 2 to 3 million entries a year, plus 1 million legal immigrants annually are causing, by his reckoning, an, quote, ethnic revolution. Because Asians, Hispanics, Middle Easterners, and others shift America's balance away from the white majority, creating a strife-torn, multiracial society. Brimelo calls for an end to all illegal immigration, a drastic cutback in legal immigration, policies favoring skilled immigrants, and elimination of all payments, and free public education for illegals and their children. That seems much more even-handed than the Wikipedia profiles, which seem to be run by, I guess, the ADL now. Have you changed any of your opinions on immigration since '95, or is that pretty much still summarize where you're coming from?
I think that yes, it's fundamentally summarized where I'm coming from. And of course, it also summarizes what is essentially the president's position right now. His attempt, he's got this RAISE Act that he's endorsed from Senators Cotton and Perdue, which will halve the legal inflow and try and reorient it towards skills. And that's more or less what I was arguing in 1995 when I published Alien Nation. So it's only taken 22 years, Jim. I have changed in some respects. For example, in Alien Nation, I was very interested in the fact that the inflow that was coming in was very unskilled, and there was really no case for unskilled immigration. And these people, in interacting with the welfare state, were going disproportionately on to public benefits of one type or another. I'm now less optimistic than I was about skilled immigration. Because although from an econometric point of view, it does create what they call an immigration surplus. That is to say, there is output in the country which would not be there if those immigrants were not there, and which goes to the native born. Currently, there's none. Currently, this great influx over the last 40 years has not benefited native born at all in aggregate. But you could benefit native born a bit if you had more skilled immigration. But the problem with it is, you get displacement of skilled Americans, right, and they're not going to stand still for it. It's one thing that when all the black giants in Los Angeles are fired and replaced with Hispanics, but it's another thing when you see, for example, all the journalists in America replaced by British journalists. That's already causing enough trouble, although there are only very few examples of it. In fact, I mean, the skilled Americans will resist being displaced, and not without reason, because the benefits that come out of immigration will not necessarily be going to them; they'll be going to other people. Well, the area where you really see that right now is is computer programmers. I mean, they've tried desperately to organize to stop this slave labor program, the H-1B program. They haven't been able to do it because the owners of capital, the Zuckerbergs and Bill Gates and so on, just have more influence because they campaign to nations, but they have caused a huge fuss about it.
And there was that story with Disney where I think they were IT guys or coders, they had to train the replacements.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
How debasing is that? Good Lord. Here's a question
really what's happening here, Jim, I mean, I was never on the left, but I was very acquainted with the student Marxists who dominated university when I was at university in England. This can be explained in simple Marxist terms. The owners of capital are basically oppressing the working class. They're importing a lot of labor, of increasing foreign labor to beat down incomes of the working class, and that's all there is to it.
That's why I don't understand modern leftists or Marxists who are for open borders and claim to be for workers at the same time. They don't seem to understand anything. You can't hold both positions at the same time. But fundamental question, which I don't think many people will ever even consider: what is a nation?
Well, the term derives from the Latin nascere, to be born, and the implication is that these are people who share a common ethnicity. In the modern era, nation state is the expression of this ethnic group. So that, for example, in the 19th century, we saw unification of Germany and Italy and so on, where people who thought themselves to share a common heritage and spoke the same language got control of their own separate states, Germany, Italy. I would say a nation is an ethno-cultural entity. That is to say, it has an ethnic base, but it's also partly cultural, and above all language. And so people can assimilate to a nation if they adopt his language and his culture, really whether or not they share an ethnic commonality. Up to a point. You can't completely remove the ethnic element, and you can't completely discard the cultural element. What's happened in America really since the Second World War is that Americans have been convinced by their intellectuals that America is simply a political expression, and that it doesn't it doesn't have a common ethnic core.
It's just an idea. It's a shared idea that everyone has, right? A propositional.
Although it's just a matter of it's propositional nation. That's right. Although it's simply a matter of fact that it did share a common cause and still do. Last time I looked, the numbers suggest that if there'd been no immigration at all into the U.S. After 1790, the population would still be about half of what it is now.
Half of what? Okay.
Because of what they call the founder effect, the multiplying, the compound interest effect of the original population. That is the core of the United States. It's fundamentally. It still remains a British and a Northern European nation at its core.
I start the show with a montage of audio clips always. This is a lot of presidents and presidential candidates saying we're a nation of immigrants. I recently read that that's an oxymoron, a nation of immigrants.
Well, there are no all nations are nations of immigrants. There's no case where people actually grew out of the ground. The question is how much time it takes to put a nation together. I mean, if you look at Britain, Britain was assembled over several thousand years, and there were different waves of people who came in. Not as many as we were led to think, by the way. I mean, genetic evidence, DNA evidence reveals that the British population has been stable since the core of the British population has been there since the Ice Age. About 80% of the population derives from the population that was there at the time of the Ice Age. But as I say, all nations immigrants. The question is how long did it take to put it together? In Britain's case, thousands of years, and how long will it take to put it apart? And in the case of the U.S., it was put together very rapidly, and now it's in the process of being dismantled very rapidly.
Well, I guess also to have immigrants, you have to have a nation in the first place. So when the U.S. was colonized, these would be settlers, yes?
Right.
Maybe even a small group of settlers and a large group of servants. That's one thing I always harp on that gets ignored. A lot of whites, most historians would say, in the colonial era at least, about 2/3 of them came under some form of bondage.
Particularly in the South, yeah. In the South, and I don't know that particularly in this area in New England. In New England, there was a wave of immigration to New England called the Great Migration in the 1620s. And then there was really no immigration at all into New England for over 200 years.
Until the damned Irish came, right?
Exactly. That's why the Irish was such a shock to everybody. But, the population grew enormously. Contrary to their reputation, the Puritans, bred like rabbits. And in fact, their heirs spread right across the country from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, and they still have a discernible cultural impact on these areas.
Thank you for debunking that pervasive anti-Puritan cultural myth that they were up to. They couldn't. I mean, they were having some fun if they were breeding like rabbits. Yes.
Absolutely.
And witch trials and murdering Indians, they could have a good time. Okay. Let's see. And to your knowledge, has the American public ever, federally, statewide, local, ever voted for more immigration?
No. I mean, it's always had to be finagled. even at the time of the 1965 Immigration Act, which was presented, by the way, as not, it wasn't going to increase immigration at all significantly. The margins of the bill tend to count in, so, and actually specifically said that. Well, even at that time, there was significant opposition. The polls show that people don't want immigrants, didn't want increased immigration. So it always has to be done by sleight of hand and maneuver by the elite.
And mostly judicially?
Well, the 65 Act, it was obvious to people who read it closely how it was going to work. And there were people at the time who pointed this out. And they were just shouted down by the Democrats, basically.
Ted Kennedy promised everyone it would not alter the demographics. We wouldn't get 1 million new immigrants a year. Everything he promised turned out to either be just wrong or a lie. Who knows how aware he was of what this bill was intended to do. But
that's the really fascinating question. How did they actually know? And I'm inclined to think there were people writing that legislation who did know what was going to happen, and they absolutely positively wanted to transform America.
And I was looking at a tape of Bill Clinton from about 20 years ago giving a State of the Union address, and he sounded like Donald Trump does now.
Exactly, yes.
About purging the illegals.
Well, Clinton, endorsed the Jordan Commission report when it came out. In the mid-'90s, after my book came out, around about that time, there was a period of considerable interest in immigration reduction. And there was a commission headed by a woman called Barbara Jordan, who was a left-wing black lesbian congresswoman from Texas. But she was very good in immigration. They produced this report in, I guess, about 96 or 97, saying that legal immigration had to be halved. We didn't think it went far enough, but it was certainly it was very similar to the RAISE Act, the thing that Senators Cotton and Perdue have put forward, and that Trump has endorsed. But Clinton endorsed it. Clinton, at that point, endorsed the recommendations of the Jordan Commission to reduce immigration dramatically.
And wasn't Hillary in favor of the 2007 wall bill or fence bill?
Oh, yeah, they all. But I mean, of course, they were all lying at the time. But they did. It's the homage that vice pays to virtue, isn't it? Yes, they did. They did lie about it. But in Clinton's case, he'd actually been defeated as governor in Arkansas, his re-election race, because of the Mariel boat lift. A lot of those people, Cubans who came in, were dumped into Arkansas, and there was a tremendous backlash, and he lost as a result of this. And he was acutely aware of the danger of immigration getting into politics, and he wasn't going to be outflanked on the right. But as it turned out, of course, Republicans just ran away from the issue. There was a bill, Simpson, what was his co-sponsor called, in Congress, but it was sabotaged by Chamber of Commerce Republicans and in the Senate, and it was never passed.
The crucial bill, the 1965, the Hart-Celler Act, is that it?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, did that specific?
That is what I'm talking about now. I'm talking about the legislation that embodied the Jordan Commission's report. The key sponsor was Senator Alan Simpson from Wyoming, and it was sabotaged by other Republicans, notably the then senator from Michigan, Spencer Abraham.
Now, did the Hart-Celler Act specifically lessen European immigration, or did it just open the gates to third world and other countries?
They imposed a quota on the number of immigrants that could come in from Britain, which was much less than had been coming in.
What was the quota?
I can't remember exactly what it was now. The real issue is that there's an end run on these quotas done by family reunification, which was much enhanced in that act. And so, although there are limits on what any country is supposed to be able to get in, that doesn't apply to you bringing in your brother and your aunt and all this kind of thing. And so it's what they call pierceable caps, I guess. And so that meant that immigrant inflow was seized by a small number of third world countries.
Now, as luck would have it, I saw you and your friend, me and my girl, were going to the inauguration, and we were passing through the metal detectors and everything at the same time. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I left early just because you're standing 350,000 yards back. It's not as exciting. But I didn't see much violence. But you wrote a really compelling essay about the leftist rioters, and the title was called "There Will Be Blood."
Yes, and of course it turned out to be the case. I mean, as you know, those of us who are actually in the city, it was like being in a city under military occupation. It's impossible to exaggerate the omnipresence of security and the army and all this kind of thing. I mean, the left got really excited because Trump's stands opposite the White House weren't full. But you know, we knew people who had tickets for those stands, and they simply couldn't get in because the security was so intense. People were letting one person in every 2 minutes, you know, frisking them and all this kind of thing. And of course, there was a lot of violence on the fringes of the celebrations in the various parts of D.C. Very similar to what we've seen since, when the Antifa just randomly running riot and bashing in windows and all this kind of thing, and attacking Trump supporters when they could find them.
I've also seen it alleged. I mean, D.C. is, 99.5% Democratic, something ridiculous, and the locals just didn't want to come like they did to Obama. But it's kind of like dick sizing at that point anyway. Who cares how big the crowd was? What's your general impression of Trump so far as president? Because I would think that immigration was the main thing that put him in office.
Yes, I mean, all we care about at VDare.com is immigration. And of course, from our point of view, he's not moved fast enough, but he has moved, and he's been, in spite of frequent reports that he's about to do a U-turn and behave like a typical Republican. He never has. We don't know what will happen with DACA, the announcement he's going to make on the amnesty for illegals who are brought here as children. But I mean, he's not given that issue up. It looks like he is going to. I mean, there's strong reports that he is going to terminate it. Of course, it's going to be terminated by the courts in this case because it clearly is unconstitutional. So he doesn't have a lot of choice here. But something's got. But you know, and also on enforcement. I mean, we publish letters from law enforcement people saying that it's like night and day compared to the Obama regime. The Obama regime, quite honestly, wanted to have as many people as illegals in as possible, and it simply didn't want to enforce the law. Trump visibly does want to enforce the law. As a matter of fact, Jim, we have a writer on VDare.com, Ed Rubenstadt, who monitors the employment data every month. We're interested in this question in the displacement of American workers because immigrants grew as a share of the workforce very dramatically under Obama. And you can more or less calculate the number of Americans who've been displaced by that. Ed's numbers this month, which we're going to publish on Monday night, show for the first time for many years there's actually a reduction in the immigrant population in the U.S. It's actually fallen slightly. Now, of course, it could be a statistical noise or it could be a temporary trend, but under Obama, it was growing by well over nearly 2 million a year. The present immigrant presence in the country was growing, so that for 2 years before about the 2016 election, it was obvious there was an illegal immigration surge going on because the growth in the immigrant population was far greater than the legal immigration. So there's obviously an illegal immigration surge going on. Well, that seems to have reversed. And it's reversed in a very dramatic way. We've published reports from people on the border, that's the border patrol officials, who say that there's a constant flow, has been a constant flow of people leaving with U-Haul trucks with all kinds of consumer goods piled on them, headed back to Mexico and to Central America. Because, of course, these people will self-deport if they think the laws are going to be enforced.
Right, if there's any hint of pressure, right.
Right. It's extremely disruptive to be picked up by the ICE, and even if you're subsequently let go. And they have property here, I mean, movable property and so on in many cases, and it's just easier to leave if they think the laws are going to be enforced.
Now, Trump elicited the typical, predictable shrieks of outrage by pardoning Joe Arpaio. Now, as far as I understand, Arpaio was held in criminal contempt for defying a court order to detain suspected, undocumented immigrants. Isn't it a crime to be an undocumented immigrant?
Right. I mean,
why is it illegal to detain them then?
And where are the cases of people being prosecuted for not enforcing the laws? Which of course is happening. It was actually a matter of policy under Obama that people didn't want to enforce the laws. And that was obviously a legal lynching that the Obama administration was doing, and Trump was completely correct to pardon him. It's one of the areas where Mitt Romney would never have done that.
Well,
Mitt Romney would never have done that. All of these conservatives would never have done it. He's a very different personality.
Yeah, Trump is, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and I wonder where it comes from. I mean, he spent his adult years in Manhattan being very wealthy with hobnobbing with other plutocrats. I just don't know where it came from.
Maybe being a business owner,
been...
I think he dealt with cement mixers and truck drivers, and he talks like them. Whether or not he empathizes, I don't even care if he empathizes. That seems to be...
I think that's obvious. He's also
blue-collar billionaire, right?
You know New York. He's actually in the outer boroughs. So
Queens,
he has
right?
Resentments against people in Manhattan. But this new book on Bannon that came out by Joshua Green is very interesting because it says it revealed. I hadn't realized. I've never seen Trump on television. In fact, I don't watch television. Which is true for example, the top 5% of Americans don't watch any television. The average American watches 35 hours a week. It's astounding. Trump is the creature from the TV lagoon. That's why the elites were so baffled by him. But ordinary people know it because they've had him in their living rooms, for 10 years. Anyway, that show was fantastically popular among blacks and Hispanics, The Apprentice. And he wasn't wrong to say he was popular with blacks and Hispanics. At one point, the show was more popular among blacks and Hispanics than it was with whites. And this is why it was so successful commercially, because it meant that you could buy the black market and the Hispanic market without having to go into these expensive niche shows. This is why it was such a commercial among advertisers. The advertisers loved it. And he chose to throw all that away by attacking Obama over the birth certificates and generally making right-wing noises. I mean, he could have been the answer to the Republican establishment's prayer. He could have run as Mike Bloomberg, and I'm going to appeal to blacks and I'm going to have amnesty and all this stuff, but he chose not to do it. I find that a really fascinating thing, and that must have come from inside him, because all the social pressure on him was the other way, and all the political opportunity must have looked like it was the other way, but he chose not to do it. So he may actually believe this stuff.
For all he gets accused of being a Nazi and a white supremacist and a Klansman, I've never once heard him use the phrase white people or address white people.
I agree. Which, by the way, would be entirely legitimate for him to use, as a matter of fact. I mean, whites have rights, don't they? If we're going to have identity politics, the whites are obviously should be allowed to organise to defend their own interests. Of course, that's the entire establishment is desperate to prevent.
I did almost 2 years ago.
As far as I can see, he's never shown any sign of being anything other than a civic nationalist.
Yes. What's fascinating, a couple things. Almost 2 years ago, I did a compilation article, 77 different hip-hop lyrics about Donald Trump. At least black rappers worshiped Donald Trump until he declared his candidacy for the presidency. Then apparently someone instructed them not to. The other thing that's fascinating to me, I think it was about a quarter or a third of Hispanics voted for him. Whereas
he did better among Hispanics.
Like far better. Like 33-5 or something. Any idea why that is? Maybe I do, but go ahead.
Well, for one thing, I don't think Hispanics. First of all, this whole category of Hispanics is a misnomer. I mean, it's an invention really of the Census Bureau and in alliance with Latino political activists who want to maximize their constituency. And I just don't think they're as politically motivated. They're motivated in the way that the professional activists are motivated. I mean, immigration, for example, hits them. It impacts them. They're the ones who directly compete with immigrants, and the evidence that I see is that they're not as keen on it as the activists would like them to be.
Do you think part of it is resentment on the part of people who actually put themselves through the immigration process for people who just cut in line?
Well, that's certainly true in my case. It was a very elaborate and difficult process for me to get back.
The root. We're getting to the roots of your hatred now. Okay, Charlotte. Okay,
I think that is true, and I think it defends people's sense of fairness, and particularly immigrants. I mean, generally speaking, immigrants are not romantic about immigration. It's only American intellectuals who are romantic about immigration.
Well, I remember I lived in L.A. for 7 years, and as I was leaving, it was 1994. There was some ballot measure to deny illegal aliens free health care.
Proposition 187.
Oh, yeah, which also California criminal code for murder 187. But It struck me as such a weird thing because I was leaving and we were moving to Oregon, but you would be stuck in traffic, you'd be at a red light, and you'd have these activists like run in the street and drape your entire car in a Mexican flag.
Right.
They probably would have done better.
As a result of this was Proposition 187 passed 2-1 in California.
Right, but at the same time, I'm thinking
the establishment ran away from it.
Ran away from it. Well, I was thinking, you know, I was legal and I worked, but I didn't have health insurance. How the hell do these guys get free? Like they're storming the streets? You talk about entitlement and privilege. It just seems I would maybe I'm too polite to go down to Mexico and start calling everyone racist and demand free things. Or I know that I would get shot.
That's right. I mean, yeah, as you know, in Mexico, if you're a foreigner in Mexico, it's illegal for you to participate in a political demonstration. And people have been deported for doing that. Every once in a while, you get American college students who are stupid enough to get involved in political demonstrations under the impression that they're living in the U.S. and they're promptly deported. So it's a completely different. On the other hand, they also have photo ID for ballots in Mexico.
That racist law. Gotcha.
Yeah, their voter security is far greater than the Americans.
Okay.
We should just, and we have a right to Alan Wall repeatedly suggested this. We should just take their entire system and import it to the U.S. One of my themes on VDare.com is that miracles happen quite frequently in politics, more than you think. We never expected the Soviet Union to collapse.
Well, that's good. Keep hope
we never
alive.
expected. Who expected Trump?
True. VDare has been online since
Christmas Eve of 1999.
1999, and you've published Ann Coulter, Patrick Buchanan, best-selling authors. Yes.
We have a number of the syndicated columnists and who I will. VDare is a forum site. I will run anybody who's critical of immigration, regardless of what their other views are. That's why it's irritating to be called white supremacy. Because I mean, if we have Michelle Malkin on the site, I mean, she's not white. I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, but she's very good at immigration.
Were any of your writers scheduled to speak in Charlottesville?
No. We had Jason Kessler, who organized it, had freelanced a couple of articles to us early in the year, but he's a freelancer. He's not involved with us. He's not on our payroll or anything.
Not on your staff. Okay. And what do you think about allegations that he's some sort of plant because he was an Occupy Wall Street and a Democratic operative at some point?
I never met Jason, but I have talked to him at length over the phone, and I don't know what his past is, but my impression was that he was simply trying to make his way as a freelance journalist, and he was writing for the Daily Caller and so on. It's quite possible that he has evolved a long way, but it's surprising how often we get emails from people who said they voted for Obama and now are ardently pro what we call patriotic immigration reform.
That's the Rust Belt. They switched. That's how Trump got elected. But you had nothing to do with the organization of the Charlottesville rally.
No, we weren't invited to speak. We didn't go. We didn't publicize it. We had nothing whatever to do with it, and it makes no damn difference at all. We're still tarred with it. Right.
So, and I think the most significant thing happened. You run entirely on contributions. You don't have ads or anything.
Well, we used to have ads because we used to get these bundled ads that you get on the internet through Google AdSense. You still have them at Target and Mac, but Google AdSense cut us and a lot of other conservative sites or deviationist sites off without any warning or explanation in February. There's a purge of
in February.
Yeah.
Okay.
And similarly, we lost Amazon about 2 years ago. We never got an explanation out of Amazon as to why we were cut off and why we weren't reinstated. But it was after a long campaign from the Southern Poverty Law Center to get them to do it.
And after Charlottesville, PayPal demonetized you.
Yes, PayPal cut us off. Fortunately, we were anticipating this because we knew that PayPal was under pressure. And these corporations are useless at standing up to political pressure from the left. So we had a backup plan, but it did damage us badly because we'd gotten quite a significant amount of steady income from recurring donations. People signed up to give so much a month, and because they did it without warning, we weren't able to switch people over. So that's been a big problem, and we on the other hand, Jim, we have a lot of supporters. People rallied around. I mean, people know what's happening, and we've had a surge of donations because of it. But I have to say, people reverting to checks. People starting to send checks in now because they know because they're afraid of committing anything to the internet.
Good God. All right. Well, final
question. It's a reign of terror. We have a totalitarian left in this country.
And people used to joke about it. And, I'm absolutely sure you're not familiar with this band. There was a punk rock band called the Dead Kennedys. And I got their first single when it came out. It was called California Uber Alice. And it was about Jerry Brown being governor. And, they're going to have the suede denim secret police. And they're going to come for your uncool niece. And it was a joke. No one thought that liberals would become that totalitarian. But it's happened.
Happened, yes, that's right. And the reason it's happening, Jim, is because the country hangs in the balance ethnically. If this current immigration policy remains in place, the whites will go into a minority by 2040. There'll be a minority of the electorate by 2060, and the Democrats have bet everything on that. And so the idea that this might be stopped is just creating utter hysteria. It could be stopped. If white America wakes up, that white America, which is to say America, wakes up, they could stop it tomorrow. They could reverse it. They could go back to allowing immigration from Europe and so on. And the Democrats are desperate that that not happen. So this is a death struggle that we're in right now.
Did you see Julian Assange's recent series? It was like 10 tweets where he basically explains Trump's victory, and that rather than having a permanent majority, Republicans probably will for another 30 or 40 years because whites finally got sick of being defamed, and that the left inadvertently created white identity politics, or at least a resurgence in America?
There's been actually significant academic work on that, that it shows that as whites move into a minority, there's a tipping process that goes on, and they become much more self-conscious and they organize themselves. So the Democrats have got themselves in a big hole right now, because if they don't nominate a black, say Deval Patrick or somebody like that, they can't turn out the blacks. But if they do nominate a black, they're going to lose the white working class. In fact, one of the interesting things in this book about Hillary Clinton's campaign is that they shattered. You've seen that book. The operatives inside the campaign became aware of the fact that there was what they called a tension between trying to reach out to the whites and trying to mobilize their minority base. And they ultimately decided to just ignore the whites, with the results that we now see.
There's. My Redneck Manifesto has been reprinted in Spanish, and apparently a bunch of leftists in Spain love the book for some reason. And somebody compared it to What's the Matter with Kansas by Thomas Frank, and I hate that comparison because I believe he was the guy who came up with the whole idea of voting against your interests. How coastal and how elitist do you have to be to say, no, you dummy, I know what your best interests are. Even though I live in conditions that are completely different than yours, you're doing it wrong. What did they expect? I mean, just basic human psychology. This group of people, everyone in flyover country is ignorant, backwards, inbred, deserve to die out. And hey, why aren't they voting for us? Like how dumb?
Well, Murray is right. I mean, America's coming apart. He was able to demonstrate that very convincingly in his book, and I got my figures about television viewership from that book. And of course, I wrote to Charles, who I've known for years, and said, "You realize that you predicted the rise of Trump." Well, he didn't like that because he's never Trump. Yes. But it's true.
Even though he's getting attacked physically for being an alleged white supremacist, anyway, it doesn't help.
We're all white supremacists,
here's
Jim.
Final fact here:
Michelle Malkin's a white supremacist.
She is. It's amazing how many of those you get that aren't white at all. Final thing here: the big story in the country is the Texas floods. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, I think the Sylvester tips us off to his ethnicity, has promised the city's nearly 600,000 illegal immigrants that they won't be turned over to immigration authorities if they go to shelter or ask for help during Harvey. I'm looking at Houston's demographics, city of 4 million. 600,000 of those are illegal immigrants. How does that happen?
Not counting the American-born children.
Yes.
So the simply extraordinary. That's why I think that one of the things I would fault Trump on is that he should have gone immediately to end birthright citizenship. That's the ultimate magnet for legal immigration.
Birthright citizenship.
Children here.
The anchor
And
babies.
and by the way, it's fantastically unpopular. When Americans, of course, have no idea this is going on, but when they realize that illegal immigrants' children are actually American citizens and entitled to welfare immediately, they're very annoyed about it. So
well,
that's why
maybe they have to pay for it.
Exactly. So it should, it's a wedge issue. He should go for that right now.
I hate paying for anything I didn't approve of or didn't cost, but that's an entirely different issue. Sir, I wish you the best of luck finding another Colorado hotel for your conference and remonetizing. Always a pleasure. vdare.com. You have a pleasant afternoon.
Thanks, Jim. Stay the course.
Hey there, boys, girls, and transgendered individuals of the podcastosphere. It's your bestest buddy, Jim Bob, Jim Bronski here. And I'm directing you, I'm commanding you to go to my website, jimgoad.net, JIMGOAD.net, on the homepage and check out the new spectacular offer for a limited edition of Trucker Fags in Denial, the classic, hilarious 2004 comic book about two aging truckers who have sex with one another while beating the hell out of gay guys. This new edition is 8.5 by 11, and the limited edition comes signed both by me, the author, and Jim Blanchard, the artist, hand-numbered, and also each individual copy has a little personal doodle by Jim Blanchard of Butch and Petey, the two trucker fags. These will not last long. Go to jimgoad.net and get them. And while you're doing it, buy every one of my other books. That's the Redneck Manifesto, Shit Magnet, Jim Goad's Gigantic Book of Sex, the Answer Me compilation, pick up the Big Red Goat CD, and even get yourself a Coexist sticker. You know that I love every one of you deeply, personally, and possibly invasively. jimgoad.net. Spend your money. The holiday season's not that far away. Buy gifts for everyone. Make me a rich man.
Make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh?
Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.
There's a hurricane coming to Georgia, and here I am, Jim Goad, with Keith E. Lee, Keith Eggnog Lee. That's your new nickname. We're going to get to your real nickname one of these days. You're also a suspected white supremacist. All of us are suspected white supremacists now, if we're white. Even if we're not, and we say there's anything all right about white people, we are suspected white supremacists. Everyone else is a suspected idiot. Actually, a confirmed idiot. If you actually believe there are a lot of white supremacists out there, you're a fucking idiot. But hey, there's a hurricane coming here at 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Supposed to be 65-mile-an-hour winds blazing through Atlanta. Maybe it will engender spirit of healing and everyone reaching out and touching one another, helping, hugging, rescuing cats, black and white, helping little old ladies in wheelchairs up from the floodwaters. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be a race war. Maybe this hurricane will be what starts the race war, but we don't know. Keith, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Just battening down the hatches here in Stone Mountain, Georgia.
You don't even know what a hatch is. I call bullshit on that right out of the start. You don't even have I've been to your house. No hatches.
I just haven't showed you my secret hatch.
The secret hatches. Jesus Christ. You're a former corporate whore, drug addict, and suspected white supremacist. I really don't need an argument when I can sling all that shit at you.
Suspicion is enough.
Okay. Are we done? Done
Yes.
with the yip yap? Okay. Yeah, tick a lock, zip a lip here. We are here to read and discuss The Week That Perished by TakiMag, TakiMag.com. Go there. I have 2 articles there every week. This is one of them. The week's most artificial, superficial, and prejudicial headlines. Stop with the rustling of the papers, Keith.
Okay.
Being tough on borders elsewhere. Clear my mouth. Get the acceptable level of saliva for announcing. One more time. Without borders, there is no nation, which is why those who oppose American borders obviously despise the American nation. While celebs yip and yap all over online media about how we should be caring and accepting and embracing of the world's huddled, shivering, worm-shitting masses, one rarely, if ever, sees them offering a spare bedroom or two to accommodate the squirming billions who seek refuge in America because their own nations are a howling testament to collective failure. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu is a swaggering, blustering, morally flatulent ethno-nationalist who enjoys the sweet rhetorical privilege of never having the mainstream press refer to him as a Jewish supremacist. For years, the Israeli state has been a hootin' and a hollerin' and blowing an ear-splitting shofar about the fact that it wants to eject the nation's unwanted and openly despised African migrant population like a dog scratching a flea off its balls. Last week, Bibi burped about the fact that Israeli officials weren't kicking the unwanted Africans out of his country with enough speed and ferocity. He says he's established a special ministerial committee to expedite a final solution for Israel's African problem. All right, summoning my inner Netanyahu. The main purpose will be to return the neighborhoods to their local residents. And it's the same Jewish voice. I'm just, even for Jewish men and women, I've only got one Jewish voice. Here we go. So I think it's a nice Jewish voice. I'm going to dust it off. Bibi Netanyahu. The main purpose will be to return the neighborhoods to their local residents and to deport illegal infiltrators from Israel, whose place is not here, just as we had deported around 20,000 who were not refugees. A very small number of them are refugees. They are illegal infiltrators who are looking to find work in the state of Israel. And we have the right, like any nation, to guard our borders and to remove from our borders whoever entered illegally. In a shocking turn of events, the American press did not refer to Netanyahu as a Nazi. 1,400 miles away from Israel, in Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is emerging as a prime contender to snatch Vladimir Putin's long-held title of the man with the biggest balls in Europe, sent a letter to pervy-looking EU President Jean-Claude Juncker, insisting that his nation neither wants nor deserves refugees. How do you do a Hungarian accent?
Ooh, it's tough.
All right, I'm just going to plod along here. God, what a trooper. Hungary is not an immigrant country. That's horrible. I'm going to read this out straight. I'm not, not in the mood to do a Hungarian right now. Hungary is not an immigrant country. Does not want to become an immigrant country. Whew. Hungary is not an immigrant country, does not want to become an immigrant country, and cannot accept being forced to change this. Hungary has no colonial past. Instead of defending our borders, the European Commission is willing to finance solely measures and organizations that aim to facilitate the admission of migrants. Then we will only give incentives to hundreds of thousands of migrants who wish to move to Europe instead of curbing migration. Orban says that many other European leaders agree with him but are terrified to admit it publicly. That seems to be very common these days, that whole thing about agreeing with people but being terrorized into silence. Someone should really do something about that. The situation has become so tyrannical that some would suggest a violent overthrow is the only possible solution. Many would agree, but would, of course, be terrified to admit it publicly. I'm looking at you, Keith.
It's definitely the case over in Europe. I have a friend that lives in Prague, and I guess the Czech Republic has tried to take a strong stand against accepting more refugees. But my friend tells me that, yeah, basically, if you disagree with wanting, to bring more refugees in, that, you are pretty much terrified into silence. And he was telling me that it's even worse there than it seems like it is in America now, with the kind of, cooling of dialogue because certain ideas are considered offensive.
Certainly, like everything's considered offensive.
Like everything, like 90% of anything most people think.
Where do you get that statistic?
I just pulled it
You
right
just
out of
made it the fuck up.
Just made it the fuck up. My
Item!
job here is to entertain.
I'm trying to do a TV show here. Item! Rodman to the rescue. Although we have no way of proving it, we suspect that Dennis Rodman may have given herpes to more human beings, male and female, than any superstar athlete in world history. He is known and loved around the planet for once declaring himself bisexual and marrying himself while wearing a wedding gown. He is also beloved for kicking TV cameramen in the groin and headbutting NBA officials. Now the former NBA star is holding out his giant bony hand and offering to pull the world back from the brink of nuclear disaster. As the only American celebrity who is having a bromance with North Korean super-duper supreme leader Kim Jong-un, Rodman is offering to act as a peacemaker between the diminutive communist saber-rattler and the much taller American President Donald Fuck-Your-Feelings Trump. If there's a God in heaven, please listen to our prayer. We beseech thee to get Dennis Rodman, Kim Jong-un, and Donald Trump together in a plush mansion on a tropical island to film a 12-week reality TV show. The ratings for the final episode, in which it will be revealed whether the planet is reduced to a smoking crater, will possibly be even higher than the Who Shot JR episode of Dallas. Keith, would you like to see a TV show like that? Dennis Rodman, Kim Jong-un, and Donald Trump on an island together?
I would like to see Dennis Rodman get the Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Medal of Freedom. Lord knows he deserves it.
Really? Do you think it's possible he may have? Which athlete, in your estimation, has spread more STDs than any other? Magic Johnson would have to be.
I was going to say Magic Johnson.
Yeah, I heard that he's still alive though because he has a Magic Johnson.
Apparently, yes. The name is very apt.
Okay, this is going nowhere. Item! Teaching teens about anal sex. Twitter has banned a woman who calls herself the activist mommy. A lot of, woman, wife accounts. I'm a woman, a conservative woman, freedom woman, wife with a womb. Have you seen all this shit?
Wife with a lot of kids.
Yeah, wife who keeps popping them out, splattering them against the wall. Twitter has banned a woman who calls herself the activist mommy for criticizing a recent instructional article in Teen Vogue called Anal Sex, What You Need to Know. Highlights from the educational essay targeted at non-adults include: the anus is full of nerve endings that, for some, feel awesome when stimulated. The anus is very tight, and the feeling of having something in your rectal area is unique. It is often described as a feeling of fullness, which can be delightful. That being said, yes, you will come into contact with some fecal matter. You are entering a butthole. It is where poop comes out. Expecting to do anal play and see zero poop isn't particularly realistic. It's not a big deal. Everyone poops. Everyone has a butt. Activist Mommy felt this was an inappropriate article for people who are legally still children. On Twitter, she used the word sodomy, which is a great word. I love the word. And especially calling people sodomites is wonderful. Mm-hmm. Sodomy, which is often used in a book called The Bible, to describe putting penises inside the place where poop comes out. She got into a brief flame war with Teen Vogue editor Philip Picardi, who bears a passing resemblance to flamboyant theatrical assistant Carmen Gia from Mel Brooks's. He really does. From Mel Brooks's 1968 masterpiece, The Producers, who responded with a picture of a gay man sucking face with a black man while giving the finger to the camera, which is not nice. In a sane world that isn't ruled by gay Martians, Picardi's picture would be deemed objectively ruder and more hateful than activist Mommy's corny comments about sodomy. But we live in a fagocracy, which is why Mommy was banned from Twitter, while Picardi remains. By the way, do residents of Gomorrah secretly resent that no deviant acts were ever named after their town? What do you think about that, Keith? I often wonder about that, the player haters of history. Like the two guys on either side of Jesus who were crucified. It's like, hey, we got crucified too.
I know, yeah.
Can we get some attention?
Yeah, you'd think.
Or Supremes, or Mussolini. Wherever Mussolini is now, it's like, can we mention me every once in a while? Like, is it all Hitler all the time?
Yeah, no. Hitler eclipses everybody. I mean, I think that Mussolini didn't he like literally coin the term fascism?
I think I don't want to pin myself to that, but I know it comes from fasces, F-A-S-C-E-S, which is a bundle of tightly wound sticks, which is a faggot too.
A fag, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Item. Furry councilman resigns with his tail between his legs. The furry community is a demented and easily mocked group of adults who should know better than to dress up as cartoon animals for sexual satisfaction without expecting people to laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh at them. In Milford, Connecticut, Democratic Councilman Scott Chamberlain was recently shamed into resigning after it emerged that he had a profile on SoFurry.com as a furry fox named Gray Muzzle. Chamberlain's profile also stated that he tolerates rape. It's unclear whether he meant that he tolerates being raped, in which case consent is implied, and then it really isn't rape anyway. And although Chamberlain also wrote what he calls a soap opera that includes furries and sexual situations, he says that his fetish, quote, has nothing to do with sex. It's an interest in cartoon animals. Well, yeah, but it's an interest in cartoon animals having sex. Ever met a furry, Keith?
I know a furry, actually, yes.
You actually do? Wow.
Yes. He thinks he's a donkey. He has his house, like his bedroom is like he has it done up like a stall with hay on the floor and everything. He sleeps on the floor, sleeps in hay. Very open about it, apparently. All his social media avatars are him and his donkey.
How much money does this guy have?
He's independently wealthy.
Yeah.
He was born,
okay.
He comes from old money.
I don't think you come from the ghetto and think you're a donkey. You
I
don't
would
last
agree.
long in the ghetto if you think you're a donkey.
Exactly. That's not good survival skills for the ghetto.
I mean, how long before it's hate speech to criticize furries?
Pretty like next week, Wednesday at 5 p.m. to be exact.
I think you might have just nailed it. Item. Another brawl at another Popeye's chicken. There have been so many eye-gouging, weave-tugging brawls at Popeye's chicken establishments across the country, one might be forgiven for suspecting that their recipe includes a secret ingredient that makes people violent. And these are all, wherever I say this here, it's a link to an actual YouTube video. If you want a fun time, just go to YouTube and search Popeye's Brawl. Loaded with videos. There was this brawl 4 years ago, and this one 2 years ago, and this one last year, and this one last month. Last week in San Marcos, Texas, a melee erupted after 4 vibrant ladies in the drive-thru lane were asked to come into the restaurant because their orders were allegedly too complicated to handle over a loudspeaker. I can't even imagine what a mess this whole fucking situation was. It ended in violence, with a nearly 8 months pregnant manager being assaulted from all sides. Why is the black community so angry with Popeyes? It seems to provide a much desired service for them. And it's not like Popeyes is trying to sterilize black America like Church's Fried Chicken was accused of doing. Are you familiar with the Church's conspiracies?
Yeah, it's really weird. Supposedly started by or run by a group of Klansmen who put something in the breading or the chicken to make black men sterile.
Yeah. Do you ever see Three the Hard Way, the blaxploitation movie? Fred Williamson, I think Jim Brown might have been in it. They're all like karate chopping. The plot was there was like some evil elderly white scientist who was trying to wipe out the black race. Fun movie.
No, they're confusing churches with Planned Parenthood.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's I guess that's an unmentionable though, and that's hate speech, and will get you deplatformed, demonetized, and cast out on the streets. If you even suggest the truth, which is that statistics might lead one to be inclined to suspect. I'm couching this allegedly, if all things being equal, that the biggest danger to blacks might be other blacks. Item. Tranny rapist moved to women's jail starts preying on women. After being convicted of rape and sentenced to life in prison in 1995, a British father of 3 named Martin Ponting decided he was actually a woman named Jessica Winfield. I wonder how they choose these names. They ever just go to the phone book, or...
I've read that guy's last name first time is Poontang.
Poontang, yeah. Ponting is a very strange name. I've never seen that before.
It is.
Well, they're just sitting. He's sitting there in a jail cell. It's like one morning he wakes up, looks in the tiny little reflective. It's not even a mirror. It's kind of like burnished steel. Good morning, Jessica. And why Winfield? Why not? I mean, like, if he wants to take it to the hoop, just why not an African name or something? British taxpayers were soaked to the tune of £10,000 to medically enable Ponting's gender delusion. We actually aren't sure what sort of work Ponting had done under the hood, but he allegedly still has a penis. Now 50, he had been moved to Europe's largest female prison, where he was recently placed into a segregation unit, quote, after making unwanted sexual advances on inmates. Pink news, and this, I'm going to say this again, we're going to test my, what's this called, a pop filter? The screen that I have in front of the microphone? Because apparently the P sound is what fucks you up on audio. Pink news, a website by and for gay birds, gay rods, lessies, and clam diggers, was not offended by anything we've just told you. Instead, they found the Daily Mail's treatment of the story to be downright, quote, horrifying. And I did a whole article a few months back about the rampant overuse of the words horrifying and terrifying. These people are terrified. Like, have they ever known true terror? Have they ever known anything worth being terrified about? If a fucking headline horrifies you? And this is why it was horrified, since it dared to use Ponting's, quote, dead name. And this is the first time I've come across this term. Dead name is one word, and that's when, I guess, the gender you were wrongly assigned at birth has been shed like a snake molts its skin. When Martin Ponting metamorphosed into Jessica Winfield, he should have shed his dead name, Martin Ponting, and no one has the right or privilege to ever resurrect that dead name, i.e. the name he was given at birth when they correctly assigned his gender at birth. And it was also horrifying that they referred to him as a father.
Oh, God.
Even though he is literally a father 3 motherfucking times over.
My God.
Lordy. Well, thank you. Said that was just a perfect segue, Keith. You said, my God, and the text here is, Lordy help a world in which the truth is offensive.
Well, that's why, that's why I'm your sidekick here, because, just get it flowing.
I was going to talk about this because we have 2 guests today. This is the first time we've had 2 guests, and I want to distinguish you, and people might say, well, Keith's a guest. I'm like, no, Keith is the sidekick.
Right. Yes.
Right. So we've established today that you're the sidekick. We've introduced a cool new sound effect every time I bring up a new item. Things are looking up. Don't get killed in the hurricane, Keith. You're a very sweet man, even though you are a suspected white supremacist. Okay, everybody, this is Jim Goad blasting to you from down on the horse farm in Georgia, where a roving pit bull named Bam Bam looks out for intruders. I'm here with comedian and actor Owen Benjamin, who's currently in Scotland. Good morning, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking. Thanks for caring. The topic today is how the left destroyed comedy. First question, who would have been a better stand-up comic, Adolf Hitler or Karl Marx?
Hitler.
Hitler, and why?
Well, Marx would have been good on Twitter.
Why is that?
I feel like he's good at memeing things. It's like he has something that's been proved to be horrifically genocidal, but it won't leave people's brains. So somehow he was good at just making something stick. But Hitler had great stage presence.
Yes.
And Hitler would have had a problem with writers.
Firing his writers, like a roving staff of writers all the time. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, he would have killed all the Jews, and then, he wouldn't have had a good writer's room. But I feel like Marx took himself too seriously.
Yeah, he seems a little more humorless, too. I think Hitler probably would have been banned from a lot of comedy clubs, too.
He could have been hilarious.
Who knows? I mean, yeah, Hitler, he was not. I read Mein Kampf on an iPhone while going to work for a Jewish boss about 7 years ago, and not a really compelling writer, but great, best MC of the 20th century, undeniable. Like
he's a terrible writer.
Yeah, a dull kind of writer.
He started doing his dictator open mics at beer halls.
There you go. Cool. I saw you on a recent podcast. You said communists were worse than Nazis. How do you expect to ever get a job again?
I don't care, man. They went so far that I just can't. I'd rather just have a normal job. Like my brother does tree work, and one day I just thought about it. I'm like, I would rather do tree work than that. And ironically, when I'm just more honest, I've had more opportunities than I would have if I just kept saying, that Aziz Ansari is really provocative and hilarious.
Yeah, you don't think he's provocative and hilarious?
No, I think a lot of these guys aren't even doing jokes anymore. Like a lot of the late night, it's government propaganda. And it's like, and my dad's a rhetoric professor. Like he teaches public speech. So like that, I used to consider myself on the left when I thought that there was some stories that needed to be told. And, when I was a kid, I thought people overglorified Columbus and whatnot. And then they swung so far, I was like, oh, I get that. And then they just stayed there and just became psychotic. And I was like,
well, that's, I think, go ahead. I think there's a problem is people see left and right as these static things and unchanging things, but these things take different shapes depending on how much power they have.
Exactly.
When I was a kid, these guys weren't burning books and punching people they were the guys saying, hey, you shouldn't burn books and punch people for having different opinions. But they got so much power, they become fucking totalitarian. And what bugs the shit out of me, especially about comedy, especially late night, for fuck's sake, especially Colbert. Why are you you're just a mouthpiece? You talk about, because they say you should only punch up, but you're actually representing power at this point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of my friends that voted for Brexit or Trump, I mean, they got the blue collar vote. So it's like at some point, the elites became what used to, everything switched. The left used to be like more the working man party, and now it's absolutely not. They're just condemning everyone that doesn't like psychotic human being Hillary Clinton is a Nazi. Yeah. And it's just to your point. It's about power. It's like they just got this big chunk of power for so long, and you just got to see this bizarre world of leftist corruption that now starts making me think about like the Gulag Archipelago and those old books.
Solzhenitsyn was a hero in the 70s. I remember they sold Gulag Archipelago in the fucking supermarket.
I recently read it. It's kind of like it's mind blowing. Like just seeing how dark it can get. Like, this identity politics of over infusing group identity to form coalitions to like overthrow power, it always seems to end in genocide and not being funny.
Definitely not being funny. Yeah. I mean, I guess what's little known about me is I'm mostly known as being intense and psychotic and angry. But in high school, Catholic school, I was the class clown, voted class clown and class wit. But I think something happened. I too many traumas or whatever. I sort of went the serious side. But I think I understand why comedy works in a lot of ways, or at least in my case. And it's whatever people are sensitive about, you poke at that.
Always.
Because
you're very funny, man. When you called me a swamp Yankee, I thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, that's. God, you're up from Oswego, New York, right?
Yeah.
Because my dad's from Enosburg Falls, Vermont, and I listen to a lot of old country music, and God, there's a guy, Stompin' Tom Connors from Prince Edward Island in Canada, and Dick Curlis from Maine. Dude had an eye patch. Those are some fucking rednecks. I mean, those are tough, rural, but they don't have southern accents, so people don't think they're rednecks. But,
I live in the Adirondack Mountains, man. It's not. I've described it to people as Arkansas with snow.
Yeah. I mean, especially upstate New York, that's got some bleak, blown out. I mean, I would think a lot of those people voted for Trump too because they just feel completely ignored, disenfranchised, cut off from media, comedy, everything else. How do you think growing up in a small town might have influenced your outlook on life different? Because my opinion is that urban versus rural is the big divide in America.
I 100% agree with you. I think that red, blue, a lot of times. I mean, it's so complicated at this point, obviously, but I think it's about personal accountability. And when you're in Manhattan and there's like 30 bipedal apes just like right next to you, you start almost wanting to submit to a giant force of government. Whereas if you live more in the country or more in a small town and you know that like your best defense is your neighbor, you know, and your dog, it's you want a smaller government. And that was always the right-left debate, was big government, small government. And now it's about whether or not someone who chops their wiener off should get a flamethrower in the army or something. Like, a lot of distractions happening.
Well, there's a term for it, minoritarianism. Like, what percentage of the population is trans? It's ever expanding because it's become cool now. And, you know, when I was a kid, there were no 6-year-old kids who thought they were girls. Or it's usually guys thinking they're girls. I think that's something about trans, too. It's like, well, if it's all fluid, why is it mostly guys becoming women? Why? Because it's uncool to be a guy now. Basically.
Yeah, it's the new goth. Like, when I was a kid, you'd like, you know, you'd paint your eyes black. Now you cut off your own dick and balls.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things, like, it's worse than getting a tattoo, you know?
Yeah.
Or you're gonna have to get like, God, there's something I'm gonna probably re-release. This is a complete sidetrack, but back when people did prank calls, when they didn't have Star 69 or any of that shit, when I lived in LA, my number was 1 digit different than Capitol Records, so we would get wrong numbers all the time. Moved up to Portland, had the number forwarded. This female to male transsexual who was obsessed with Mick Jagger started calling. I tried telling him, no, you got the wrong number, it's not Capitol Records. And if he was a Stones fan, they never recorded for Capitol Records anyway, I don't know. But so I'm like, all right, I'm going to have some fun with this guy. And basically, I pranked him under 6, 7 different voices, and then he tried to kill himself. But that's a whole different story and a complete sidetrack. But the trans thing, I mean, it was until, 3 years ago, everyone kind of agreed, well, those people have a mental problem.
Right.
But now you have a mental problem if you say they have a mental problem.
Yeah, and I think they do have gender dysphoria, and I think they deserve rights, just like someone with OCD should have rights. You know, it's not like but I don't think that you should make every bakery in America have a 3rd bathroom for someone with gender dysphoria.
Well, the idea of rights is kind of murky too, and it's like, do they have a right to my tax dollars to change your genitals?
No.
I'd object to that, you know. That's otherwise, you know, should they be beaten up? No, you know, like.
Of course not.
But everyone thinks that. They think, I mean, them especially are the most extreme. They think everyone wants to kill them and bury them, and like even saying, well, I don't think you're actually a woman. That's violence to them. It's like, they used to be funny. Talk about comedy. What, like, trannies are like the least funny people in the world now.
I used to live in a tranny neighborhood, and I always thought they were awesome. And
there's enough of them for a neighborhood?
Yeah, in LA on Las Palmas. It's like, it seems like there was, I mean, there'd always just be like tranny cat fights outside our window.
How close is that to Whitley? That's pretty close.
Yeah.
That's where I lived. I lived on Whitley for like 7 years.
Yeah, like Santa Monica, like where right there. There'd always be like tranny hookers. And they seemed like just kind of ballsy and aggressive. You know, I didn't like hang, but I always was like, oh, that's hilarious. And then they became like, they seemed less victim-y then. Like it seemed more like they're like, I am whoever the fuck I want to be, you know? And now it's like, don't look in my eyes or I will kill myself.
One thing I noticed, because I used to be kind of a worshiper of black culture in the 80s, and there was an Eazy-E song, and also the prison writer Iceberg Slim. They both talked about going home with some chick, finding out the chick had a dick, and beating the hell out of them. And I guess, you know, because they're black, it's okay or whatever, but I just wonder how much of this violence against trannies is a result of that, and not just, I don't like you because you think you're a woman, I'm going to beat the shit out of you.
I think a lot of it is that. I think a lot of it is also they're in a very bizarre world, it seems like, that I don't really know that much about, you know, like to me, there's something weird when the suicide rate in Auschwitz was lower than trans people.
Have you heard of the transabled?
No.
These are these people, and as far as I can tell, it's a neurological dysfunction where the way your brain maps out your limbs, they legitimately think they don't have a left arm, and they're agonized until they feel relieved when they cut off their fucking arm.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be celebrated too. But I mean, there's trans pride now. Like, when are we going to have schizophrenic pride? And
well, that's already coming. My buddy does a podcast, Sword and Scale. My buddy Mike, and it's all about like murders. It's really well done. And like when he touches on mental illness, he just gets flooded with just people so angry at him, where it's like, oh, he's shaming mentally ill. He's like, dude, it was a podcast about a dude who ate a guy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's okay to be against that.
Shaming. But the thing about, okay, I did an article called The Shame Sham a couple of years ago. These people, you know, you shouldn't shame someone for being fat. You shouldn't shame someone for being a chick. Shame the people who say that. It's like, well, you're shaming anyway then. Like, if shaming's your fucking... Like what kind of sick person gets off on inducing shame in someone else anyway? That's kind of sadistic, no?
Well, currently the left.
Totally. I mean, just demoralizing people, or like Alinsky isolating, paralyzing, attacking, rendering immobile. That sounds a little uncompassionate and closed-minded. You know, Camille Paglia.
It's almost like almost like a female tyranny, where it's like, the way I always saw it is right and left kind of worked well together, when it's like, you need the force of the father, which is like, dust off your pants and try harder, son. And then you need the force of the mother, where it's like, you're great just the way you are. And together that's great for society. But like, when you have this, when the genders become warped, and then you have like the tyrannical father and the, you know, this disgusting mother that's like almost Oedipal, like an Oedipal mother. And I think that we're seeing the Oedipal mother grow right now, where the strongman tyrant, we're not seeing as much as they're claiming. It's the Oedipal mother, and it's really, really weird. I mean, it's no one's fault. Like, if you're in the group, it's no one's fault that's in the group. It's always someone else. Like, if you like piss on a guy and he tells you to stop, like, you should sue that guy for shaming you, like pee shaming you or something, you know?
And that's, I guess, I mean, that's why I don't identify with left, right, any of this shit. Because once you're in a group, I think it plays into evolutionary psychology and survival. We're the good ones, they're the bad ones, so it's okay to kill them. They're not human. And I drifted from the left probably like the early 90s, just because they became just like the fucking nuns I went to school with.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, me too. I was raised too.
Just don't, you know, everything's offensive. It's like, oh, fuck you. You know, and it's like the Sam Kinison line. I didn't want to fuck you in the ass until you told me I couldn't. I didn't want to become a racist or any of these things you think I am until you told me I couldn't. Now you've made it fun.
Yeah, it's like reverse virtue signaling.
It's all about virtue, yeah, which is not funny. Virtuous people aren't funny. There's a few of them. I've got a friend. He's a brilliant graphic designer, most noble person I've ever met. Also, like, the funniest. That's like finding a unicorn, though. People tend to be funny or virtuous. Virtuous people are not a lot of fun. Camille Paglia, who I think is smartest woman on earth, she said in Salon, while the campaign was going on, that Donald Trump is hilarious. He's a much better comedian than Jon Stewart. And she kind of had the same disgust you have for the modern Colbert smarminess. What do you think of Trump as a comedian?
I did because I do a podcast called Why Didn't They Laugh? And I did one whole episode just based on who is the funniest candidate and why. And I broke it up into different categories. There was the funniest writer, the funniest off camera, and the best with crowd work. And Trump is great with crowd work. Sometimes he gets too fired up, though. I think he's really good, like, on late night shows. Like, he has hard jokes, and he's good at just shifting power quickly. And Ted Cruz was really good at being heckled, because he just would never react. Like, he just had that ice about him where he wouldn't. And Hillary was definitely the least funny.
Horrible. Like, people don't understand. You know, it's Russia. No, it's like your candidate had no charisma.
None.
I mean, and it's not because she was a woman. It was because she was that kind of woman. Everyone knows that sort of hectoring, wrap you on the knuckles with the ruler kind of woman. That was her. You know?
Yeah, someone with extreme power claiming victim card is it doesn't work anymore. You know, it's like when Muhammad Ali did it is much different than when Colin Kaepernick does it, because of the just sheer power and stakes.
Right.
Where it's like, you know, when you're talking about a time with Vietnam, an actual draft, segregation, you know, and then you have a fighter not worth that much money, like, that's an inspirational story to go against the authority. But like, now when you have someone, I don't think a lot of these elite people know how poor people can get. And like, when you see anyone worth millions of dollars and, you know, you just served in Afghanistan, or you're like a single nurse mother, you're like, stand the fuck up, asshole. I don't care what you have to say. And that's more the issue than what they're trying to say. I think that these extremely wealthy celebrities have just almost made hypocrites of themselves, where nothing they can really say holds weight because they've already taken all the gold and silver, where you're like, go fuck yourself.
I put something on Twitter yesterday. I don't know, it was Beyonce, Ariana Grande, one of these people talking about no borders and no walls. And I said something like, well, surely you have a spare room or two. You know, but they never...
Yeah, like J.K. Rowling, like all these people. It's like everybody so into climate change has their own plane. Everyone so against walls has their own walls. And they assume that people are so stupid they can't see that. And people are like, you know, I think they're more likely to go against climate change issues because of the spokespeople are such assholes. It's like, I did a tweet the other day where I'm like, it's not the smog, it's the smug.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what turned me off to almost all this. That's what you said about Muhammad Ali. His alibi for not going to Vietnam was no Vietnamese ever called me nigger. That's what he said. I just saw on Twitter the other day somebody said Kim Jong-un never called me white trash. Which sort of, I mean, that kind of sums it up. It's like, I don't give a fuck what's going on in North Korea. Like, you're shitting on me. You know, your elites call me deplorable, you know, inbred, knuckle-dragging racist. How do you expect people to respond? And then the smuggest thing of all, because my book Redneck Manifesto was just released in Spain, where it became a huge hit. It was ignored here. But somebody said that, I guess the Spanish left loves that book for some reason. Maybe they mistranslated it or something. But he said that it's being compared to What's the Matter with Kansas by Thomas Frank. I met Tom Frank at some zine convention. Nice guy, but Marxist. But that, to me, the voting against their own interest. How more fucking condescending can you be? Not only to, like, you're calling them stupid, and you're saying they don't even know what their best interests are.
Yeah.
These people from...
they treat them like dumb children. It's like, it's the same with Christianity, where it's like, they'll just destroy Christians and then never bring up Islam. And then, and you start realizing it's because Christianity is less likely to shoot them in the fucking head.
I mean, it's hard. I try not to go for people's motivations, but like, you gotta, if their behavior's inconsistent, I guess it's okay to speculate. I think the reason they accept Islam and they hate Christianity, because, I mean, come on, objectively, if their issues are women and gays, for fuck's sake. Like, when was the last time a Christian threw a gay person off a building or stoned a woman to death for getting raped?
Well, I mean, I blacked out last night, so I can't say what I did, but I may have stoned some chicks.
Stoned some chicks? All right. It's kind of, well, it's violent there. I think you need self-defense is good in Glasgow. But I think I think the operative principle there is they just hate everything Western, and we hear about xenophobia all the time. Its antonym is oikophobia, which is an irrational fear of your home and your culture and your surroundings. That's what a lot of these people seem to demonstrate. It's like maybe they had bad relationships with their parents or something, but they're still rebelling against that. And, you know, anything that destroys where I grew up, that's cool, and that's not only cool, it's righteous.
It's like the most people you hear saying, like, every single person that's ever accused me of culturally appropriating things have been white.
Yeah.
Like, always. It's always the whites that are the most psychotic.
But did you notice, like, they go, well, hey, why y'all be appropriating? These are the same people that talk like they're black, that are screaming about cultural appropriate. Hey, girl, you know, that's...
You can't, that's so, it's so crazy you can't even bridge it. I mean, I do a bit about... you know, wearing a sombrero and someone saying that that's cultural appropriation because me and my buddy were Jose and Jose B for Halloween. And it's this long bit. I'm not going to bore you with it, but because the same guy who accused me of it had me do a skin cancer awareness walk. And so I did this long thing about if anyone needs a sombrero, it's white people because we're white. And I'm like, the whitest people have the smallest hats, Jews, you know, the yarmulke. I'm like, so I think Mexicans and Jews should switch hats, and that's how we cure skin cancer. It's like long and peppered with shit.
Right.
But it's like, oh, whites can't rap? Well, then you guys can't use the fucking microphone. Well, it's like, how far do you want to take this thing? Democracy, science.
I've said that so many times. Like, you know, you just complained about cultural appropriation on a computer and through electricity lines that were largely, almost entirely invented by white people. Do you want to swap? I mean, you can have Bo Diddley back, but you're not going to have a computer to bitch about white people anymore.
Yeah, you guys can have peanut butter. We'll keep capitalism.
Do you think? Okay, here's a good topic. I was trying to think, like, when did it switch? When was the first time I ever remember a comedian being protested by other comedians for being politically offensive? It wasn't Sam Kinison, because Sam Kinison, he was an ex-preacher and he railed against the acceptable targets like Christians and everything else. It was Dice Clay, and it was when Nora Dunn on Saturday Night Live refused to appear alongside him. I'm not sure if you know Dice, or I'm sure you're familiar with his work. He was the guy who... Huh?
Yeah. I've met him before. I don't know him personally, though.
What was your general impression of him?
That he almost became his own caricature in a way. Like, I saw him at the Comedy Store, and he was wearing like weightlifting gloves.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's hilarious. But I find him harmless, and sometimes I find him hilarious, but other times I don't know. He just seems like not a threat to anybody.
Did you ever see him throwing a tantrum on CNN and getting up and walking off? You're the fucking biggest fucking idiot. You're a moron, and just walks off. And also, Tom Green had a show, and he reached over and touched Dice on the shoulder. He's like, "Don't fucking touch me. I told you not to touch me." And he touched him again.
Like Val Kilmer, like he became his character.
Yeah.
Like Val Kilmer did The Doors, and then ever since he's been Jim Morrison.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Dice he's a Jewish dude from Brooklyn who wants to be an Italian dude from Brooklyn, I think is basically
right.
What's going on there. Yeah, but that's the first time I remember like comedians getting righteous. I thought comedians were not those people. They were the jesters that made fun of those people.
Yeah, man. I used to be a heckler at a Renaissance fair. Like, people threw tomatoes at my face for a living. So I know
this
what
is
it's
a
like.
job. Heck.